Welcome to another deep dive. Today, we're exploring something I think you deal with every day, your phone, and how it might be impacting something really deeply personal to all of us, your faith.
That's right. We're going deep into an excerpt from Your Phone and Your Faith, and I think you'll find some of the ideas really thought-provoking.
It starts off strong,
Yeah.
suggesting smartphones could be modern-day idols. It sounds extreme, but I'm curious to hear more.
The source makes comparison to the Israelites
Oh,
and their idols. It wasn't about, bowing down to a statue. It was about anything, taking that top spot in their hearts, the place that should be reserved for God.
okay. So not literally worshiping our phones,
Yeah.
but
Maybe letting them take over our time and attention in a way that's not healthy. I know I'm guilty of checking my phone way more than I pray some days.
Okay.
Yeah. That's
Yeah.
it's exactly what the source is getting at. This idea of time theft. It references Psalm 90.12, which reminds us our days are numbered. We only get so much time for everything that matters. The source suggests that all those minutes we spend scrolling could be used for growing closer to God.
it's making me think about that story of King Solomon in 1 Kings 11.4. Even though he was known for his wisdom, he let his many wives lead him astray. They worshipped other gods, and his heart became divided. Could our phones be dividing our hearts in a similar way?
It's a really insightful connection. And it leads into the source's next point, which is about how our always on, hyper-connected world can make us feel spiritually dry.
What exactly does that mean? Is it just
Wait.
about not spending enough time in prayer or reading
That
the Bible?
It's more than that. Think about the parable of the sower and the thorns from Matthew 13.22. Jesus compares the cares of this world to thorns that choke out the good seed, which represents the word of God. The source argues our phones with
Wow.
their
Constant notifications
Yeah.
and demands for attention
Yeah.
can be like those thorns. So, it's not just about finding time. It's about the quality of our attention. Like, even when I'm trying to pray, my mind is often racing with all the things I saw on my phone earlier, or worried about what I might be missing.
Precisely. It's like our phones create a kind of mental clutter that can make it hard to connect with God on a deeper level. We're constantly distracted and our minds are divided, just like Solomon.
Haven't there always been distractions? Even before smartphones, people had jobs, families, hobbies, things competing for their time and attention.
That's true. But I think there's something unique about the way our phones are designed. They tap into our deepest desires for connection, validation, and even escape. We get little dopamine hits every time we get a like or a notification. And it's
Right.
hard to resist that pull.
That desire for connection when it's directed towards our phones,
Yeah.
instead of towards God,
Yeah.
can lead to that feeling of spiritual emptiness, that spiritually dry syndrome the source
Yeah.
talks about.
You're getting it.
Mhm.
And it's not just a feeling, it can have real consequences for our lives. The source gives an example of someone who starts their day by reaching for their phone instead of reaching for God. They scroll through social media, check emails, and before they know it, hours have passed without a single thought about their faiths.
Oh, I've been there, waking up and immediately getting sucked into the black hole of my phone. It's like I'm starting my day on autopilot instead of intentionally choosing
Yeah.
what I want to focus on.
What the source emphasizes is that these seemingly small choices, repeated day after day, can add up to a significant disconnect from our faith. It becomes a habit, a pattern of behavior that can be hard to break. And it's not just about the time we lose, it's about what we're filling our minds with.
It's like we're constantly bombarded with
Yeah.
information, opinions, and images, and it can be hard to filter out the noise and discern what's truly important.
Especially when it comes to our faith. The source argues that in a world that's increasingly hostile to faith, we need to be more intentional about protecting and nurturing our spiritual lives.
It's interesting because the source mentions the increasing wickedness in the world and the need to be vigilant, even quoting 1 Peter 5.8, which talks about the devil prowling around like a roaring lion, seeking someone to devour. It's a pretty intense image.
It is, and I think it speaks to the seriousness of the issue. The source isn't saying that technology is evil, but it can be a tool that's used to spread lies, sow division, and distract us from what's truly important.
So what's the antidote? How do we protect ourselves from these spiritual attacks and stay connected to God in a world that's constantly trying to pull us away?
Well, a source offers a really powerful solution, and it's one that's been emphasized throughout history: prayer and the Word of God.
Those are definitely not new concepts, but maybe they're even more important in today's world.
Exactly. Think about it. Prayer is our direct line to God, a way to communicate with the creator of the universe. And the Bible is like a user manual for life, filled with wisdom, guidance, and truth that can help us navigate the challenges we face.
But sometimes it's hard to make time. For those things life gets busy, and it's easy to let prayer and Bible studies slip to the bottom of the to-do list.
I hear you, and that's why the source emphasizes the importance of making them a priority, not just squeezing them in. When we have a spare moment, it's about recognizing that our relationship with God deserves our time and attention.
The source actually uses a really powerful analogy from Psalm 1.2-3, describing a person who delights in God's law and meditates on it day and night. It says they are like a tree planted by streams of water, which yields its fruit in season and whose leaf does not wither. It's a beautiful image of spiritual vitality.
Isn't it? And it contrasts sharply with the image of that person who starts their day scrolling through their phone, feeling spiritually drained and disconnected.
So it sounds like the solution isn't necessarily getting rid of our phones or disconnecting from technology entirely, but about changing our relationship with them.
Exactly. It's about recognizing that our phones are tools. And like any tool, they can be used for good or for bad. The key is to be intentional about how we use them.
Okay, I'm all for being intentional. But how do we actually do that? What are some practical steps we can take to make sure our phones are serving us, not the other way around?
Well, the source offers some really helpful advice. One suggestion is to start by simply becoming more aware of our phone habits. How much time are we spending on our phones each day? What are we using them for? And most importantly, how do they make us feel?
So, step one is really just paying attention, being mindful of how our phones are impacting us, both positively and negatively.
Exactly. Once we had a better understanding of our habits, we can start to make changes.
Like setting boundaries, maybe. I've heard people talk about having phone-free zones in their homes or setting limits on their screen time.
Those are great ideas. The source also suggests turning off notifications, especially for social media apps. That way, we're not constantly being interrupted and tempted to check our phones every few minutes.
I think that's a really important point. It's like our phones are designed to be addictive, with all those notifications and alerts constantly vying for our attention.
They are, and that's why it's so important to take back control. We need to decide when and how we're going to engage with our phones instead of letting them dictate our lives.
It's like we're taking a stand for our spiritual well-being, reclaiming our time and attention for what truly matters.
You're getting it. And it's not just about limiting our phone use. It's about being more intentional about how we use the time we do spend on them.
What do you mean? Instead of just mindlessly scrolling, maybe we could use our phones to connect with other believers, listen to uplifting podcasts, or even read the Bible.
Exactly. There are so many amazing resources available online that can help us grow in our faith and connect with others who share our values.
It's like flipping the script, using technology to enhance our spiritual lives instead of letting it detract from them, instead of being passive consumers of whatever content comes our way. We can be active curators, choosing content that feeds our souls and inspires us to live more meaningful lives. It really is about making choices, choices that align with our values. Instead of letting our phones dictate our day, we can be intentional about how we use them and for what purpose.
That brings us back to that powerful question the source poses at the end. If your phone were to disappear tomorrow, would you feel closer to or further from God?
Wow. That really stops you in your tracks, doesn't it?
Well,
Sitting here thinking about how I'd feel. And it's making me realize that maybe I do rely on my phone a little too much for my own comfort.
it's a question that forces us to confront our priorities, doesn't it? What does it say about our relationship with technology and with God? If the absence of our phone would bring us closer to Him.
It's almost like a spiritual litmus test, isn't it? If we're honest with ourselves. The answer reveals a lot about where our hearts truly lie.
And that's the beauty of this whole deep dive. It's not about guilt or shame. It's about awareness and empowerment. We have the power to choose what we focus on, what we prioritize, and ultimately, what kind of relationship we cultivate with both technology and with God.
So it's not about throwing our phones away, living off the grid, or going back to the Stone Age. It's about finding that healthy balance, using technology in a way that enhances our lives without hindering our spiritual growth.
You got it. And remember, this conversation is just the beginning. Keep reflecting on these ideas and maybe even try some of the practical tips we discussed.
I know I'm going to be thinking about that final question for a long time. And hopefully, this deep dive is giving you some food for thought as well. What are your takeaways? What resonated with you the most?
We always encourage you to continue exploring these topics
Yeah.
on your own. Maybe you'll revisit the source material or discuss it with someone you trust.
And if you're looking for additional resources, we'll be sure to share some links on our website.
Thanks for joining us on this
Yeah.
deep dive into the intersection of technology and faith.
Until next time, may your relationship with God be the guiding force in your life.